2024, the year of skibbity toilet and low taper fade, and also the first year of deck driver's existence. In early 2024, I kind of had the feeling that, I'd been playing Magic for quite a while at that point, and I decided I really wanted to make a YouTube channel about it. But I was a little bit nervous. I had done social media in the past a little bit with a totally different avenue, not Magic related at all, and it's done well. But I never thought that I'd be able to get into the Magic space so quickly at such an alarming rate. But you guys have been so supportive since the start of my channel back in March of 2024 that I just want to take a chance to make a video, thanking all of you for 13,000 subscribers. Thanking all of you for being so welcoming to the Magic community. And also the topic of today's video, which is recapping some of my favorite decks of 2024. Now, since I started my channel in 2024, they're actually pretty much every single deck I've covered is from 2024. So we're going to keep this list a little bit, secluded to just a couple of lists, as most of these are new. They're not necessarily new to me, but they're new to the channel, of course. Now, starting off this list, of course, is going to be Othari Sun's Glory. This video to this day still has over 100,000 views on it, and to this day is still probably my favorite list I've ever shown to the channel. Now, since then, I've actually completely rearranged how this list is. The list that has so many views on it on Moxfield is still there, but it's very different than the list that I actually use in real life now. I have another one on my Moxfield called Othari No Limits, which has about 4,000 views. You might have seen it, you might have not, but this one is worth a lot more money, and it's a lot more consistent at what it needs to do. I love this commander, I love Boros, and I love going wide and attacking over and over and over again. Extra Combats is my absolute peak fun gameplay in Magic the Gathering. Getting extra things on top of extra things is always nice. I love extra turns, I love extra combats, and more importantly, I love winning the game. And sometimes that makes my opponents mad, but nothing you can do about that. I love Othari as a commander so much that it's also in my two most powerful decks, Jetmir and Queen Marchesa. Basically, if a deck has red and white in it and it makes sense for Othari to be in there, I am putting Othari in that deck. So this is one of my favorite decks that I have built this year and that I've showcased on this channel this year. The next deck I want to talk about is my Muldrotha deck. Now, this is another deck that has gotten a complete video on its own, but has since seen a ton of changes brought towards it. For one, I've definitely upped the budget and the quality of cards we put in there. The land base alone is now worth probably about $100 or $200 just because we're using a lot of utility lands that we can get through something like a Sylvan Scrying or through a crop rotation. I've added a couple more ways of just straight up beatdown. You're not always going to have that control-y gameplay that Muldrotha loves to use, so we have a lot of creatures and enchantments that actually help us get bigger and bigger creatures so we can actually win through some beatdown gameplay as well. Now, obviously, this deck is a lot more different than other decks I've made in the past. I'm usually a low-to-the-ground, aggro kind of guy. I love going wide, making them all really big, and hitting my opponent. It's a very simple gameplay strategy that I love executing over and over and over again. However, this kind of gameplay is much different than what I am used to. I'm trying to stop my opponents from interacting with me as best as possible. I'm trying to put as many cards in the graveyard as possible, getting my lands back, making sure I'm ramping just as much as I should, getting some of the best utility lands in the game and looping them over and over. Stuff like Strip Mine, Dust Bowl, Echoing Deeps is great, Dark Depths is something I like to use, and of course Field of the Dead, which I actually have the special version that's worth like $40. It's pretty cool. But using cards like that, it's definitely a very different strategy than what I'm normally used to in something like a casual EDH setting. But I love the deck nonetheless. The next deck I want to talk about is something that I cannot ignore anymore on this channel. It is my Zyrus Combat Tricks deck. This deck is an absolute blast to play. It's so budget friendly. It's a spell slinger list. You get to deal a ton of damage and draw into a brand new hand, which lets you do it again and again and again. If you're looking for a cheap option that allows you to play some combat, play a little bit of Voltron-y, but also draw a ton of cards and hit for crazy damage, this is the list that I'm going to recommend. This list is an absolute blast to play and is relatively cheap for most standards. The list I have in the description is about $100, but you can easily whittle that down with some cheaper spells to get it to around like 45 and 50. I think that's where it first started, but after making a couple tweaks, it's gotten to the price tag that it is. Zyrus is an absolute blast to play. There's so much flexible gameplay where you can tell your opponents that you're going to attack them for 3 and then you draw 3, and that's great. There's other times where you can be very sneaky with your language of, hey, I'm going to attack you. Do you want to draw some cards? Then they have to worry, am I about to get one shot by Zyrus? Am I about to draw 12 cards except I take 12 damage? How much damage is worth it? And you can negotiate with your opponents of how much damage are you willing to take? And on your end, you can get them in a pretty lethal range with, let's say, 11 to 12, maybe even like 14 damage. They're going to draw 14 cards, but so are you. And now you can do something where next turn they're always in lethal range, so they're always going to be a little bit scared of you. And it just adds a lot of politics to the game, and it's absolutely hilarious to play. And it's a blast to play as well, which is why it makes my list as one of my favorites this year. For my next list, we're going to go back to our budget style of gameplay. This is in some of the budget decks that I made, and this is our Gut True Soul Zealot budget commander deck. Now, since then, there has been a couple of changes that I've made to this list. I have actually 2 different lists, one that has Anointed Procession and Mraa. This is the one I play in real life, but I also still have the budget list that comes in handy pretty often. You'd be surprised that even with pretty low quality cards at your disposal for something like this deck, you're still able to hit like a truck because there's nothing more powerful than swinging with a 6/3 zombie with Menace on turn 3. Let's say turn 1 you play something like a Novice Inspector, the next turn you play a Loyal Apprentice, and on turn 3 you play Gut True Soul Zealot. You're swinging with a 4/1 zombie right then on turn 3. Then the next turn, you're buffing it up with Inspired Leader, and now you have more 6/3s coming out every single turn over and over and over again, and you're dealing so much damage. Now, the reason in real life I like to add Anointed Procession and Mraa is because they are so valuable. Every single one of your 6/3s is now turning into 2 6/3s every time you make a token. However, you also have other token creators, which is how you make the skeletons, and now those are also being doubled, which means you're netting even more. Something like a Siege Gang Lieutenant in this deck is absolutely insane. You're making 2, you can double that to 4, you take out one of them, and now you have 3/3 goblins going at your opponent, as well as 2 6/3 black skeletons with Menace. This deck is absolutely terrifying to play against and is the definition of aggro in Commander, which is why I love it so much. I've got 2 lists for you. I've got the original budget, and I've also got the one I play in real life. Go check those out, and I hope you guys enjoy those. Now, we're on to our 5th and final deck. And before we go there, I want to just send out a shout out to everyone for subscribing. Again, this channel was kind of just a shot in the dark. I wanted to upload some content based around Magic, and just a few videos in, and I had quite a large following from there. While the videos were pretty controversial at first, I of course dialed it back, and I wasn't trying to be a content farmer. I honestly didn't think that Rule 0 video was going to be that controversial in the first place, but turns out people are very opinionated about Rule 0. But since that video, I've learned so much. I've had such a blast making Magic the Gathering content, and it's been such a joy to upload multiple times a week and see my community grow and grow over and over again, week by week. So I want to thank you guys all so much for watching. If you guys are interested in supporting me further, you can check out the Patreon in the link in my description. But now it is time to talk about my 5th and final deck that I loved building in 2024. In 2024, I really enjoyed making white and red decks. Now, what makes white and red even more powerful? Adding black, of course. Queen Marza is by far my favorite deck that I have made this year. There have been so many decks that have come and gone, so many decks that have very creative identities to them, but there's one deck that I just love playing, and that is Queen Marza. Queen Marza just loves sitting there, accumulating value, and I just get to let the game play around me. I don't have to worry too much about opponents coming at me, as they're most likely going to be goated. I don't have to worry about if I'm going to be drawing cards because my commander allows me to draw cards. There's so many other ways in my deck that I draw cards. This deck is a politic master, and it really is exactly what you would want in something like a monarch deck. You want to be the king, and you want your subjects to be fighting around you and trying so hard to get to you, but they never will be able to get there. So far, this deck has not lost a single game. Now, you could say I'm pub stomping, but to be fair, I think I've only played around 10 games with it at varying different power levels of pods, still trying to figure out how well this deck can actually play. Lots of test hands, lots of innovation from the start of me building the deck, and the deck is really coming together. I think the reason it hasn't lost is mostly because it is a goat deck, and goat decks typically go to the point where you're always going to get down to the 1v1, and if you can win the 1v1, you're going to win the game. And typically with something like Marza, you're accumulating so much value over the course of the game, where when it gets down to you and one other player, you have either a full hand or you have an incredibly powerful board state that you just swing out, you play an extra combat, and you kind of just win the game from there. I know I definitely have a lot of friends that don't enjoy playing against this deck because it is so passive, but that's exactly why I like it. Sometimes the aggro player just wants to sit down and watch the world burn, and that's exactly what I like to do with Queen Marza. So those have been the 5 decks that I have loved playing and building and talking about the most on my channel this past year. Here is to a great 2025 of Deck Driver, and here is to yet another year of growing an awesome community that loves Magic the Gathering, loves deck building, playing at a high power, and of course just talking about the game as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a friend or you have an LGS that you think would enjoy this kind of content, please feel free to share my channel with them. It helps me out a lot, and hopefully it provides more entertainment to more people. I want to thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you guys all next time.